Hi, I'm Pastor Heather from Berkeley Hills Lutheran Church. I bring you a message for the third Sunday of Easter. We begin with a reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24. Now on that same day, when Jesus had appeared to Mary Magdalene, 2 disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe that all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them. Sad, afraid, excited, terrified, a spark of hope, a lot of dashed expectations, death, emptiness, despair. What's next? What do I do now? All is lost. This is not what we had hoped for. Nothing left but to go home. That's a lot of emotional turmoil to go through in just a couple of days. So before the 3rd day is over, 2 disciples decide to go home. It's a 7-mile walk from Jerusalem to Emmaus. So if they leave now, they can still get there before dark. I think a lot of us have been doing a lot more walking than we used to. We feel cooped up, stuck, distressed. Too much news, too many changes, too much to worry about. Fear, death, sickness, stress. Some are overworked and some are barely holding on for work. One minute our hopes are lifted and the next they are dashed on the floor and stomped on. How do we tell right from wrong, true from false? So we get out there and we walk. It's about all we have left to do. It's been so interesting to me to hear your stories of adventures out of the house. Tom is like a roving reporter. Every day he tallies up the people, the pets, the items of interest. We get a weather report and the standard of dress for the day. And he also offers a photographic record of where he's been and what he has seen. Jen posts just occasionally, But she finds these beautiful places to go walking. And I really appreciate her gratefulness for those places. Naomi sent out a harrowing email account of reluctantly leaving her home. She had to go to a doctor's appointment. And in the middle of that, finds herself responding to someone in need and then realizing the exposure risk that she had just experienced. She's not the only one I've heard tell of such experiences, instinctually and faithfully responding, as we always have and always will, to someone in need, only to later think, worry, wonder if we've just put ourselves in harm's way because of an unseen, unheard, undetectable enemy, the coronavirus. 2 disciples leave Jerusalem, having heard the harrowing account of Jesus' death, having received the morning report of what the woman found on their walk to tend to his body, already laid in the tomb, having processed enough of this to know that they could no longer be exposed to the stress, fear, and sorrow. So they left. Vamoosed, hit the road. Well, I'm told that the road wasn't really much of a road by today's standards. It was more of a path, let's say. I love the image of these pilgrims traveling together, struggling to understand tragedy and loss. I love that Jesus enters the story as a pushy traveling companion who sidles up beside them and talks their ear off for the rest of the trip. I love their honesty, that they had hoped Jesus would be the one, but he wasn't. I love that it's not Jesus' deep, thoughtful exegesis of the promises in Scripture that opens the disciples' eyes to his identity. It is his presence with them at a shared meal, and the way he, the guest, presumes to pick up the bread, give thanks, and offer it to them, the hosts. That's what finally tips them off. But sometimes I wonder if there isn't more to the story than this. I came across an unusual portrayal of the Emmaus story. This is a painting by Diego Velázquez. It's called The Kitchen Maid with Supper at Emmaus. I want you to notice that Jesus and the disciples sit off in the background, in the upper left corner of the canvas, while a kitchen maid stands in the foreground right at the center. Her head is turned toward the meal that's happening behind her. She listens, almost peeking in, when Jesus breaks the bread and the disciples finally, suddenly recognize him. It's almost as if she knows before they know, as if she sees him for who he is before they do. Maybe her expectations were different from theirs. Maybe her hopes had not yet been lost. Maybe her place in the home, her role as servant, opened her up to see in a different way. Notice that though she is at the center, her gaze draws our attention toward Jesus, back toward the back of the painting, toward the periphery. And yet the scene of Jesus is smaller and less finely detailed. So where are we supposed to look? You'd think a depiction of the Emmaus story would center on the miracle of Jesus. Who do you think is the true subject of this painting? As we look around us in our daily lives, who do we most readily notice? Who is at the center of our vision and care? Who lives on the periphery? And who might we overlook entirely? So I encourage you in the coming days to take a walk. Take an Emmaus walk through your neighborhood. Explore it with new eyes. Look for signs of hope and new life and reflect on how Christ is present or hidden in that place. And then, after that initial walk through your neighborhood, think about this. Are there places where you struggle to see hope? Then I want you to go back for a second walk. Pause in those places to read this passage from Scripture and see if you see with new eyes. Amen.